First of all, we have to start the new session. So we start the CCS client like so, and then we open the session selection dialog, and we can see we can start different types of sessions. So a real-time session runs on the server, a simulation session runs locally on the workstation, has no external connections. A replay session allows you to replay the packets of an old session into a new one, and the analysis session is a sort of read-only view of an old session which allows you to post-process its data. If there are any sessions currently running, we can see their information in the upper part of the dialog, and we could join them by clicking the join buttons here. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll start a simulation session, and the system proposes a new name for the session which contains some timestamp information. There's the name of the user that started the session and their workstation name, and also the type of session that we started, simulation here, and then we can add a string to the end of the session name to make it readily identifiable. So we start the session now, and we can see some initialization messages appearing in the log, and for every session that's run there's a directory created in the results directory which will contain the results of the session. If we bring up the File Explorer, we can see that for each session there's a directory named after the session, and this directory will contain the packet archives or the test sequence logs, and it will contain various databases that contain telecommand and telemetry parameter details that have been recorded during the session. Let's now have a look at the main window, and you can see that the window is divided into several panes, and each pane can be undocked into a floating window or redocked back into the main window, and these panes can be arranged into any layout you like, and you can save the arrangement of panes from this view save layout or restore them from the restore layout option. Now in the right hand pane we have the test sequence management pane and the manual commanding window, and in the left hand pane we have various displays of packets, telecommands and their packets, telemetry packets and parameters in their various displays, and various other kinds of information about the telemetry and telecommand flow. In the lower pane we have the event log with all the system level events that occur during a session. Each message has a timestamp with a severity level, and these messages can be filtered according to their severity or according to particular search strings within the message text themselves. Okay, we'll look at the launchpad in a bit more detail, and we'll start a new session to do this. So I'll just create a new simulation session. And you can see as the session starts up, the window down here is the launch pad, and this allows you to monitor and control all the CCS processes and to start relevant archive viewers. So the launch pad is started as the CCS starts up, and by default it's started as a transparent window without decorations, so it sort of fades into the background and doesn't take up too much screen space. If you want to see it as a normal window, you can check this decor toggle, and that puts the normal Windows Manager decorations around it. So toggling that on and off allows you to make the window transparent or non-transparent as you like. We'll just leave it in the foreground for the time being, so we can see what's going on. We have the name of the currently running session, and it's green, so that means that all the processes in that session are running okay. And the category of session, this is a simulation session at the moment. If we click the OBT toggle, we get a display of the current onboard time, and this time is refreshed from each telemetry packet as it comes in. the time is refreshed from that packet, and you can see we have a window here that's telling us the system time, the last time that the onboard time was updated. If we click the status toggle, this gives us a more detailed view of the processes that are running inside the session. So we have the status of the CCS server, the interface manager, and the various indexing processes. So the telemetry indexer, the telecommand indexer, events, and test sequences, and remote commands that have been executed. And we can see some more details here about the current sizes of the indexes and what they contain. These buttons are green at the moment because the relevant processes are running. If for some reason they stop unexpectedly, they'll turn red, and you can try and restart them by clicking on the relevant button. If we click on the Tools menu here, we bring up some buttons to start up the different archive viewers. So the telemetry, telecommand, events, onboard events, test sequences, and parameter viewers. Each of these buttons will start a different viewer. It's also possible to start these viewers from the Windows Start menu. So if I click on the Start button and go to the CCS folder, each of these entries under the folder allows you to start the same viewer as can be started from the window here. You can quit the Launchpad by clicking the Quit button. If you want to bring it back, you can click on this icon here in the Tools menu, or from the Tools you can click the same icon, and that brings up the Launchpad again. Let's have a closer look at some of the CCS tools. So the telemetry history display. This shows you a display of all the telemetry packets that are archived in the database. And for each packet, you can see the mnemonic, the SPID, the packet ID. You can see the description of the packet from the MIB database, and other attributes such as the API ID, the generation time and reception time, the POS type and subtype of the packets, and source sequence count, and the identification fields. This window also allows you to filter the display from the filter button, so we can say what attributes we want to filter on. For instance, if we want to look at only a particular range of SPIDs, we could enter a range here and click Apply, and that will show us SPIDs in the range 0 to 1000. Or we can add a sort of disjoint range, so this will show us all the SPIDs from 0 to 1000 and then SPID 6000. And we click Apply to apply the filter, and then once we've done that, if the filter is applied, the button up here will turn yellow, just as a visual cue that you're seeing a filtered display of packets in the display. You can also save a filter, so if you have a particular filter set up, you can save it to a file. Then if we clear the filter, so the filter is no longer applied, we can see the filter button is no longer yellow, so we're seeing all packets. And then if we like, we can load the filter that we had and reapply it. We can also, if you click the revert button, that allows you to revert an edited filter to the last filter that was applied. just close this, so let's clear the filter. Up here at the top we have the navigation button. This button here is clicked at the moment, which means that it's in live mode, so every new packet that arrives in the system will be added to the display at the top. We can click the pause button here, and that will freeze the display at a particular time. And then these other buttons allow you to step or navigate through the archive. So we can step backwards and forwards by a single packet, or we can rewind at a slow rate or a fast rate. So this is winding backwards or winding forwards. And we can go to the very start of the archive, and then we can go back into live mode, and then we'll see new packets arriving as they come in. You can change the ordering of packets, so at the moment packets are ordered by the reception time, or we can change that to the generation time, and then they'll be ordered according to the selected property. You can also jump to a particular time in the archive by entering a time here and then clicking the go button, and it will go to that particular time in the archive, and then you can navigate around that time. We can select packets in the display, so we can shift click and select a range of packets, or control click to select individual packets, and then we could drag and drop that into a text editor, and we'd receive a sort of tab separated format of this display as text. We can also print, so if we go to the file menu and select print, and then we can print either the currently selected range of packets, or the current page that's loaded, or a time range, in which case we can enter a time range and it will print that selected time range. And we can print either directly to a printer, or we can print it to a file. And this is going into a file under the current results, current session results. In the user subdirectory we'll have a file called demo.tsv. We can try going to that directory. CCS variable results, the most recent one, and there's our file. If we open that, you can see the packets that were saved. One advantage of the new CCS tools is that we can have multiple instances of each viewer open configured in a different way. So for instance, if we start up a telemetry stream, we start receiving a selection of telemetry packets in, and we can start up a TM viewer and see the same history in live mode, and we can set up a filter on this viewer just to look at see the instances in one particular packet. And now we're in live mode. Every time a new instance of packet 1000 comes in, we'll see this viewer being updated. We can start a second TM viewer, and that will carry on showing us the complete list of packets, and we can even start a third one to look at a different packet. So for instance, if we go and look at packet 6, so now we have one viewer that's showing us packet 1, and this viewer is showing us packet 6, and this viewer is showing us the complete list of packets as they come in. And we can toggle each viewer independently out of live mode and step back through this packet history to see what's been going on. Okay, we'll look at the telecommand history, and this shows us a list of all the telecommands that have been sent during the course of the session. We haven't actually sent any telecommands yet, so we'll run the telecommand sending. Just to send a few telecommands here. We can see for every telecommand that's sent, we can see it appearing in the list together with its, so we can see the generation time, the TC request ID, the TC name, and then the history of the verification stages that the telecommand has gone through. Let's just stop that. So, and again, we can see a filter, so we can set up a filter to only select a certain subset of the telecommands, and that works in much the same way as the filter for the telemetry. We have navigation buttons, so we can pause the display or step back through it and jump to a particular time in the session. TC history display also has an extended mode which we can enable with this toggle, and this shows you the history of each acknowledgement for each stage as it was received for a particular command, and you can see those grouped together under each command. And as for the telemetry history, you can also print, so you can print a selection or a time range, again just as for the TM history. You can also select and drag into a text file. We can also have multiple instances of the telecommand viewer open, so if I start a test sequence that's going to send us a selection of telecommands, and I can have a telecommand viewer showing us all the telecommands at one time. I can have a second instance open that's just filtered on a particular API ID, so say 16. And again in live mode, so this will just show us all the telecommands sent to API ID 16. Let's just run the test sequence again. And we see both of these viewers can be in live mode updated as things happen, but the filtered one will only show us the telecommands sent to API ID 16. We can quit the TC viewer like so, and then we'll look at the events. So for each system event, we can add you can see a list of system events, and again we can be filtered by severity level or by a text string. It's also possible to add an annotation to a particular message, so we can just add a string that will identify that particular message, and we can add that to a range of messages. And then this annotation string is just kept in the database along with the record for each message. And you can also set up a filter for an annotation. So if we only want to see the messages that are annotated as demo2, we can set up that filter, and then we only see those annotations. This also applies to the telemetry history and the telecommand history. For each packet you can also add an annotation which you can then search and filter on. The next viewer that we'll look at is the onboard events viewer, and this is actually an instance of the telemetry packet history display, but which has been pre-filtered only to display the service 5 telemetry packets, which are the onboard events packets. Now the simulator isn't sending any of these packets back yet, so we can't see anything in the display, but this is just dedicated to showing the in particular the service 5 packets that the spacecraft might send back. The next viewer we'll look at is the parameter viewer. We can start that like this, and the parameter viewer enables you to drag parameters from the main window display and see their current values or their historical values in the window. So for instance, we can select a specific parameter and just drag that in there, and we can see its current value, or we can select a whole packet and drag the whole packet into the viewer, and then we'll see all the parameters from that packet listed here. and we can drag another parameter if we want, or we can drag a display, and then we can see all the packets from that in that display. So now we've got a long list of packets, and we have the familiar navigation controls at the top, so we can, at the moment we're looking at live data, we can pause and then wind backwards through the history, or step backwards. We can look for add in a search, so we can filter for particular parameters. So we can find a parameter in display, or we can filter it just to see that particular parameter. We can, at the moment we're showing only valid parameters, values, but if we unclear that checkbox, then we can see all the parameters regardless of whether or not they're valid or not. Let's just clear that filter, and then we can see all the parameters there. You see these parameters are currently invalid, but they're being shown. If we check the valid checkbox, then they disappear from the display. We can also look for parameters with an alert state, so any parameters which have violated their limits or for some other reason, and they'll appear here. I'll just run another test sequence, telemetry calibration. Let's just make this window a bit bigger. And then if we're in live mode, we should see the there we go, we're in live mode. If we just click on alert, then we see some parameters which are generating warnings or alarms. We'll see their values appearing in the window there. The last viewer we'll look at is the sequence viewer, the test sequence viewer, and this will give you a list of all the test sequences that are currently running. We can also see the test sequences that have been run during the course of the session, and this will show us not only the test sequences that are running on this workstation itself, but if we had a server client set up with a server with multiple workstations attached to it, we would also see these test sequences running on each workstation and on the server. So this would give you a complete view of all the test sequences that have been run during the course of the session. CCS has a tool called the MIB browser, which allows you to see a tabular view of all the telemetry and telecommand definitions in the currently loaded database. And we can bring that up by clicking the MIB view icon. And this gives us a window with the top tabs are sorted according to the two main categories, so telemetry definitions and telecommand definitions, and then along the bottom there's a tab for each table in the database. So if we have TM selected at the top, we can see all the telemetry related tables along the bottom. If we select TC, we can see all the telecommand selected database. Another feature of CCS is that it supports the loading of multiple databases at a time. And you can see in the first column here, the source column is identifying the database that a particular row has come from. The databases that are loaded can be specified in the settings. So if we have a look at the database entry here, the load paths node under the database node, this can specify a series of databases with an identifier for each database, and then a path relative to the test environment where the MIB files from that database can be found. And at session startup, when the CCS is starting the session, it will go through these load paths and it will load each one in turn and merge them all in memory while the session is running. While we're browsing the MIB database, we can use a filter term down here or a search term, So for instance, if we wanted to look up records that were belonging to a particular database, say the internal database, we could type that in and it would find the first matching record. Then we can look up subsequent records. Or for instance, if I was looking for a particular parameter name, I can type that in and it'll find the first matching record with that string. You can also use this as a filter. So if I click on this toggle button, then we can see only the records which the filter term has matched something. The CCS has the capacity to drop and reload a database while the session is running. And this can be done through these toolbar buttons here, so drop and load DB, or from the file entry. If I select drop DB, that means all the currently loaded definitions from the MIB are discarded, and at that moment the session is suspended. You can see we've got a report here that the manual command is suspended. So at this point we could make some changes to the database. For instance, we could edit the SCOI table to change IP addresses for SCOIs or something similar. And then when we were ready to go again, we could click the load DB button, and that would reload all the ASCII MIB files and load them into memory. When we want to go again, we have to resume the manual command by clicking on this button here, and then we're back in business running the session. We've seen that in the TM parameter section there's a displays tab, and this lists all the displays that have been defined in the MIB database, and for each one you can expand the display and see the parameters that have been added to that display underneath it with their current values. We can also look at those displays in the sort of traditional SCOS-like way by clicking the AND button, and that will bring up a selection of all the displays, this time arranged as buttons. We can browse through them, and if we double click on one particular display, we can see the display as a sort of traditional SCOS-like alphanumeric display. We have a list of parameter names and their current raw and engineering values and their descriptions. If we double click on one of the parameters, we can see the current value in detail. We can see the limits and the calibrations that are currently applied to that parameter, and we can also see information about the packets that that parameter is listed in. As an alternative to using the SCOS-like AND displays, you can also use a newer display that's developed for CCS, which is called the TM sheet. And here we can just, if we right click on a display and select the TM sheet option, we get a parameter display which shows us all the parameters in that that were added to that display. And this is showing us again in a dynamic way a layout of the parameter values, its timestamps and so on. An advantage of this display is that it's searchable, so we can search for a particular parameter or search for particular occurrences of that parameter, and we can filter on a particular parameter, and we can also filter on alert states. So we can see that all these parameters are currently okay. If we filter on alert, and we'll make parameter A1001 violate its limits again, and now we'll see that this parameter appears, because we've filtered alert statuses, we see only the parameters that are currently violating their limits. So again, if we now reduce the value so that it's back in limit, then it'll disappear from the display. The CCS also supports a tool called Synopter, and Synopter is a display which can show what are called synoptic pictures, and a synoptic picture is a diagram which is animated by incoming telemetry. So this particular synoptic picture has a strip chart showing the values of certain parameters and a set of gadgets down here whose graphical appearances can be controlled by various telemetry parameters. So if we start a simulator, so I'm going to start a simulator for SCOE 1. And then we're going to start SCOE 1 sending some telemetry. So this will start sending us some packets, and we'll send it with we'll send it about 8 packets a second so that it's reasonably fast. Off we go. Now we can see in the TM history we're getting in packets, and now you can see that these gadgets down here are being animated, and they're being driven by the values of parameters in various parameters in packet number 1. So as well as viewing the synoptic picture, you also have the possibility of editing them. For that we have to go to the synoptic directory of our test environment, and we double click on one of the files in there, and that opens the synoptic editor on that particular file. So here we can see what the definition of that synoptic picture is in the synoptic editor. Now the synoptic editor is it's easy to use, but you can do some very sophisticated things, so we won't go into all its possibilities here. We'll just point out that on the left hand side you can see the graphical objects and assets that have been included in the picture. On the right hand side you have this palette of objects which you can put into a picture. So for instance we could take a parameter box which just displays the value of a parameter. We can drop it on to the picture, and that's created a new object in the object catalog. Now we can click the Quick Connect button, and that will connect, bring up a list of parameters which can be connected to that box. And it's just loading up the database first. So now we can take, for instance, our friend A1001. We just double click that, and that's done two things. First of all, that's created a dynamic object which is going to represent the parameter in this synoptic picture, and it's connected that to the various properties of the box. As well as looking at the this sort of WYSIWYG view of the picture, we can also look at the connection view, and this allows us to see in a graphical way first, for each visual object that you can see the properties that that object has, and you can also see what they're connected to. So this is telling us that the parameter box 33, it has some general properties like an X and Y position within the window, a width and a height, but it also has the properties that it's going to display, such as the name string, the timestamp information, war and engineering value, and these have been connected to the correspondingly named properties of object param 34, and we can navigate to the other end of that link and see what they're connected to. So this concept of having objects which have properties, and those properties can be connected to other objects, is the sort of fundamental core of Synopter. And you can also have sort of pipelines of objects where you can have an object such as an expression which can combine several values into one, and the output of that expression can be linked to another object. So we'll just go back into view mode. So we've edited this, we can save the file, and now if we open the synoptic viewer again, Open the same file. Now we can see down here we've got the value of A1001 being displayed in the synoptic picture.